Hello and welcome to this video where we'll be deciding if our estimate is an overestimate or an underestimate. Now, for all of the calculations that we've been looking at, there is an actual answer. And our estimate is either going to be bigger than the actual answer, in which case it is an overestimate, or our estimated answer is smaller than that actual answer, in which case it is an underestimate. Now, before we look at some examples of this, I just want us to think a little bit about the four operations and how they get affected as we increase or decrease numbers in that operation. So let's say I was adding two numbers, some number A, some number B. What happens as they get bigger? Or what happens if they get smaller? So if I'm adding two numbers, if I made this number bigger, my answer would get bigger. If I made B bigger, my answer would also get bigger. If I made both of them bigger, definitely gets bigger. That increases. Similarly, if I make A smaller, my answer would get smaller. If I was to make B smaller, my answer would get smaller. If I make both of them smaller, my answer definitely decreases. Hopefully that's quite obvious. Similarly, A times B. All right, I've got two numbers multiplied by each other. If I made A bigger, here, my answer is going to get bigger. If I make B bigger, my answer is going to get bigger. Similarly, if I made A smaller, my answer would get smaller. If I made B smaller, my answer would get smaller. So with addition and multiplication, as you make those numbers bigger, your answer gets bigger. If you make those numbers smaller, your answer gets smaller. Hopefully that's quite obvious. What we need to be very careful of is when we're taking away answers, if we're taking away numbers or if we're dividing numbers. So if I have two numbers here and I'm doing A take away B, what's going to happen is A gets bigger. If A gets bigger, well, my answer is going to get bigger. If B gets bigger though, my answer is going to get smaller. So that's different. Beforehand, if I make both of them bigger, answer gets bigger. If I make both of them smaller, my answer gets smaller. Here, if I make A bigger, my answer gets bigger. If I take away a bigger number, that means my answer at the end is going to be smaller. So these here are different. What happens is A gets smaller. If A gets smaller, my answer is going to get smaller. If B gets smaller though, if I'm taking away a smaller number, suddenly my answer gets bigger. So here, the way that it matches up is I need A to get bigger. If A gets bigger, and B gets smaller, that means my answer would definitely increase. So here they need to change in different ways for my answer to definitely increase if I'm changing both of the numbers. And if A gets smaller and B gets smaller, that's the only way I can guarantee it definitely gets smaller. So I need A to get smaller, B to, oh, mistake. Oh, mistake, Mr. Marks. Let's repeat that again. If A gets smaller, B gets bigger, that makes my overall answer smaller. If I'm taking away a bigger number from a smaller number, that's what makes it smaller. So here they need to change in opposite directions to have a definite answer at the end in terms of what that looks like. And that is quite similar with division. If A gets bigger, if I'm making this number bigger, still being divided by the same number, that would make my answer bigger. If I divide by a bigger number, if I'm sharing it between more things, that's going to make it smaller. If I make this dividend smaller, that's going to make my answer going to be smaller. And if B gets smaller, that is going to make it get a much greater answer. So here it's the same idea. They need to change in opposite directions. If A gets bigger and B gets smaller, my answer is going to get bigger overall. And if A gets smaller and B gets bigger, then that's going to be smaller overall. So that is what we need to do to figure out if our estimated answer is going to be an overestimate or an underestimate. We've got to think, is our answer going to be bigger than the actual one or smaller than the actual one. So let's apply that skill to some example questions. So estimate 7.2 times by 3.14. Well, the estimate for that is approximately equal to 7 times by 3 equals 21. That's my estimate. My estimate is 21. And I need to think about, is the actual answer going to be, is it going to be bigger than the actual answer, sorry, or is it going to be smaller than the actual answer? Well, here I've made these numbers smaller, which means that my answer is going to be smaller. So then this is an underestimate, because both have rounded down. Okay, this time estimate 4.837 adds 6.92. Well, I mean, approximately that's going to be 5 add 7, which is 12. My estimate is 12. Now here I've made this number bigger, and I've made this number bigger, which has made my answer bigger, so this is an overestimate. As I rounded both up. Both rounded up. My answer is bigger than the actual answer. That is an overestimate. So division, remember, division is tricky. Here, estimating, that is approximately 7 divided by 2. So my estimated answer for this would be 3.5. Now let's think, is this bigger or smaller than the actual answer? Well, I've made this bigger and this smaller. So overall that's going to make my answer much, much bigger. I'm dividing a bigger number by an even smaller divisor. That makes my answer bigger. That is an overestimate, because this number is called the dividend. As rounded up, and this number is called the divisor, as rounded down. Okay, let's have a look at this one. Estimate 41.3 divided by 7.92. Well, that's going to be approximately 40 divided by 8. So my estimated answer is 5. I've rounded this down and I've rounded this up. That's going to make my answer smaller overall. I'm taking a smaller number and dividing it by something even bigger. That's going to make this an underestimate. Because do you remember what this one's called? The dividend, as rounded down, and the divisor as rounded up. Okay, don't worry, only 2 more to go. 2.9 times by 5.2. So here, that is approximately 3 times by 5, which is 15. Is my answer here, is it an overestimate or an underestimate? Well, I've rounded this up and I've rounded this down. Ooh. Okay, well, remember what we said with multiplication, if I round both of them up, it's definitely going to be much bigger. If I round both of them down, it's going to be definitely much smaller. Here I've gone in opposite directions with multiplication. Here, I can't tell. It could be an overestimate, it could be an underestimate. There's no way for me to tell. All these other ones definitely was an overestimate or definitely was an underestimate, because they both moved in the correct direction to tell me that. Here, I can't tell. With multiplication, if they've gone in different directions, I can't tell. Next, here, estimate 29 divided by 2.64. Well, that's approximately 30 divided by 3, which is 10. Is this an overestimate or is this an underestimate? Well, this has been rounded up, and this has also been rounded up. Again, I can't tell. I can't tell. Remember, for division, it needed to go in different directions. This is going to make my answer bigger, but this is going to make my answer smaller. So I can't tell. They're not both moving in the correct direction. Okay, thank you.